I found this over in the bushes. I'd say she's with him." William stared at the paper and felt a chill go through him. The paper was a fragment dropped carelessly onto the ground. The paper read, "Chatty Dawson," written in quill and ink, but torn deliberately from a letter of some sort, and dropped here, within sight of this camp. Deliberately. "All we know now, ma'am," said the Inspector General of the Railway to Jenny Dawson the following morning, "is that several eyewitnesses say she was seen jumping down upon the man on horseback." "Are you trying to tell me my little girl ran off with the Sundown bandit?" asked Jenny Dawson evenly, as though he'd better not be trying to tell her that. "Ma'am, I'm not even trying to tell you it was the Sundown bandit who did the robbery. There's so many copycat robberies these days that—" "Mr. Tanner," said Jenny, "I do not want your opinions. I want facts. Tell me what you do know about this supposed willing kidnap of my daughter. She would have no reason to want to be with the Sundown bandit." "That's not what we hear locally," said Tanner, with some sympathy. "When a girl gets that age, she can be very confused about right and wrong, and who her heroes really are. I have it on good authority that your daughter was in love with him." Betty Maynard, Bandy's mother. Oh, of course. She would have had to put her 2 cents worth in. That woman. Anything to discredit the Dawson family. It was a wonder and a shame that Chatty ever got on with Bandy at all. Bandy wasn't due until tomorrow on a special, and her parents had come to town to stay all night at the hotel to await the morning arrival of Bandy from St. Reginald's. She would have by now heard all about the missing Dawson girl, and obviously she had raced down to the station to put in her appearance, and to tell whatever she wished. It's a wonder she hadn't run smack into her before now. Jenny looked about her, and sure enough, over on the boardwalk stood Betty, squinting towards the saloon, probably looking for her no-account husband, Jack Lee. The drunk. Jenny smiled despite herself. "My daughter," said Jenny seriously, "would not do such a thing. She is an honor student at the Marlston Academy." "Nice school," said Tanner, impressed. "Thank you," she said sweetly. "Well, your daughter has only been gone 3 days, Mrs. Dawson," said Inspector Tanner. "It's about that far by horse from the water tower to here. Don't get discouraged yet. There's still hope." "Do not speak of hope, Mr. Tanner," said Jenny Dawson. "You don't know what it is like to have a missing child." "Yes, I do," he said, and suddenly a gravity filled his voice, making her wince. "Oh, yes, I do. And since you asked, I shall tell you. I shall tell you how it is, Mrs. Dawson, when they bring you the arm of your little boy, and tell you that they think they have killed the grizzly in whose belly lie his unblessed remains. I shall tell you about that sometime, Mrs. Dawson, when you are better able to handle it." He regarded her sternly, like an angry father. "Good day, Mrs. Dawson," he said, turning away. "Good day," she said, in awe. He walked away from her quickly, the shock of telling her that suddenly registering on his broad features. As she watched him go, she turned quickly and stared down the railroad tracks. They went out of sight about a quarter-mile away, and somewhere out there her little Chatty was fending for herself, all alone, with no mother to advise and feed and clothe her. Jenny Dawson began to feel the impact of her daughter's loss for the first time. Chatty might be gone for good. "Chatty," she said weakly, terror in her voice, but nothing answered her again. Just the wind off the lonesome prairie, just that and nothing more. Jenny felt her insides begin to ache sympathetically for her daughter's plight. For the first time since she had heard the eyewitness accounts, Jenny Dawson was glad that Chatty had been seen jumping onto Sundown's back. Sundown would at least never get eaten by a grizzly, no matter whatever else he ever did. "This looks like a good spot," said Sundown, dismounting the horse, as Chatty slipped off the great rump of freighter, landing expertly on her feet. She was getting better at that. She smiled at her own accomplishment and dusted her hands together. The spot did indeed look good. It was down in a forest primeval, near a stream of the purest water there could be. Chatty flitted over to the edge of the brook and knelt down to splash her face with water, cooling her hot brow. Most of the day they had traveled slowly through the high woods, wondering when it was going to get a bit warmer still. Chatty recalled the day's ride and lowered her face to drink from the pure water. It tasted so good that she just drank and drank, filling her empty little stomach with the liquid. Oh, it was so good. She had been so dry. When she stood up, she practically sloshed. Her stomach felt stiff and good. She wondered when they would eat again. Sundown was whipping up a small lean-to of sorts, big enough for the both of them to sleep under. Chatty smiled and was thankful that Sundown did not plan to tie her hand and foot to a tree tonight. Maybe she could sleep better than last night. While the outdoor air had revived Chatty somewhat, she felt like all she needed was a plate of that gravy meat and one of those old hard biscuits, and she could sleep from now until Christ came back. Yes, just about that long. A shot rang out, and Chatty jumped, covering her ears way too late to stop the sharp ringing and the momentary deafness that comes with being so close to the muzzle blast of a Colt .45. Chatty shuddered the evil vibrations out of her body with a deliberate cringe. Ugh. And she looked up at Sundown, fully expecting to see that she had dropped a sheriff or a member of his posse. She peered into the approaching darkness and saw nothing at all. Sundown had walked over to the direction she had fired the gun and was digging in the bushes for something. She emerged a second or two later with something long and furry in her hand. She held it up over her head with a determined effort. "Supper," she announced to Chatty, and smiled at her. "You are one fortunate child. This night you will get to taste Sunshine's very own rabbit skewer." "Sunshine?" mouthed Chatty to herself. The Sundown Bandit's name was Sunshine? It was a rabbit she held in her arms, and Chatty felt her guts crawl. When the meat was salted and hanging from a tree, it was all right to eat that. When it was on her plate, covered in gravy sauce, it was divine. But when it was suspended from one arm, bleeding and still twitching, one glazing eye staring into her soul as if to say, "You," over and over again, well, that was a different matter. Chatty felt her gorge rise and remembered it was still full of brook water. She felt queasy inside. Sundown failed to notice Chatty's nausea. She went right over where she had been clearing a place to build a fire, and she put the rabbit down on the ground. "Get our things, Chatty," said Sundown, "and all the blankets. Winter is a-comin', and tonight I think it will let us know that." Chatty nodded, grateful that she would not have to help with the skinning and the gutting and the so forth of this tiny woodland creature. Chatty had tasted rabbit before and had enjoyed it, but the rabbit was in a Hassenpfeffer sauce, and it was concealed totally. Just meaningless lumps of meat called rabbit, not a living, breathing baby of the forest. This is the way outlaws live, Chatty told herself. They live hard and they take what they want. Tonight Sundown wants rabbit. Don't you dare cross her, girl, or she might decide she wants you one of these nights. Chatty got their things and busied herself with the campsite. She worked quiet a while, building and making them crudely comfortable dog beds, as her mom used to say. When she would have girlfriends over for the night, back east, she would say to the girls, "Make yourselves a pallet on the floor, and make yourselves at home. All we have tonight are dog beds." Chatty smiled, remembering that. Okay, so she could pretend they were camping out. Yes, that was fun. Do that. Camp out with the Sundown Bandit. Would Bandy be livid or what? Chatty finished the camping arrangements and made 2 beds right together under the lean-to. She wondered if Sundown was the type of woman who would lie awake at night and peer through the tall trees above them and talk to Chatty about, well, girl things. It would be wonderful to have a bandy-type conversation with the Sundown Bandit. Sundown prepared their dinner as bloodlessly as she could. While she didn't seem to care whether Chatty got grossed out or not, she was expecting Chatty to at least try her dish, and she did not want to totally turn her off by the sight of the dead rabbit. By way of discretion, Sundown tossed the skinned hide over into the weeds on the other side of the creek. That way, what ants it did draw, or other animals, they would go over there after it. She washed the body and field-dressed it proper. Whether or not Sundown admitted it, she found that she did like Chatty Dawson and her company a lot. Sundown cooked their dinner, and just as she had predicted, it smelled great. As Chatty came out of the tent area at last, a meticulously pair of sleeping rolls prepared inside, she smelled the food and wondered how Sundown could make that great smell out here with nothing more than a saddlebag from which to work. To get this kind of smell back home, Chatty's mother had to work all day in a hot kitchen with maids and servants and helpers. More pots and pans than Sundown had probably ever seen, just to get this kind of smell. Chatty walked over and sat down beside Sundown, who was busy skewering bits of rabbit onto small sticks and marinating them in some unknown sauce, which was boiling over into the fire just then. Sundown had cut the rabbit up into such small, delectable chunks that Sundown could not even tell they were eating rabbit until she tasted it. "Now," whispered Sundown, swirling a bit of rabbit in the sauce, "pop this into your jaw, Chatty Dawson, and tell me what you think." Chatty took the proffered bit of meat and chewed. Terrific," said Chatty, tasting it thoroughly. She did not have to fake liking this. She did like it. She liked it an awful lot. Gone were the thoughts of the poor little bunny rabbit. Gone were the feelings of brutality. That rabbit had been hiding this great-tasting food within its hide, and Sundown had just been doing her duty to bring it out. A sweet, greasy little smile marred Chatty's beautiful face as her own hunger took her over. She licked her lips, greasy with rabbit, and laughed. She said lustfully. That's good, Sundown. That's real good. I swear, said Sundown, you are worse after this than I am. She had fed Chatty several chunks of the excellent meal, and she had snarfed them down like a dog would a bit of prime rib steak. Chatty loved this rabbit concoction, and was not ashamed to admit it. She seemed to eat anything Sundown shoved at her. That's the liver, doll, said Sundown, smiling. You really are a connoisseur, eating the organ meat and everything. Here, get some bread down you, child, before it belches you. You might not be used to such rich food as this. But Chatty was used to rich food, and lots of it. She ate the rabbit in stride, and Sundown saved herself only a little bit of it. Chatty, starved from 2 days on the road, ate like there was no tomorrow. Finally they sat back, drinking coffee and talking. Chatty looked at Sundown in a new light, smiling at her and feeling much more comfortable around her. They might not get along this good again, but tonight was going great guns for both of them. Chatty couldn't see Sundown tying her up tonight, not after they had gotten on so well today. Sundown, asked Chatty, after a few greasy, pleasant belches, why is it called Sunshine's very own rabbit whatever? Sundown sat back and rolled a smoke thoughtfully. She looked at Chatty and then back down at her cigarette, edging it perfectly before lighting it with her stick in the fire. She swallowed a sip of her whiskey and sniffed. Skewer, said Sundown. It's called skewer because you eat it on these little sticks. I think it's Chinese, but I don't know. I once met a Shaolin priest who prepared it for me. He showed me how it was done. He was some wandering monk who was looking for something or other. I think a family member. His name was Kwai Chang Caine, and he asked me my name. I told him, and he said it was very pretty. He liked me, Chatty, even in my cowboy suit. Strange people, them Chinese, but nice, and smart, too. That man could do anything. He taught me a whole lot. What is your name, Sundown? Asked Chatty, almost reverently. You gonna laugh. I really think you will, but you heard me say it earlier. Is your name really Sunshine? Asked Chatty. Yep, she says. My real name is Sunshine. Chatty chewed upon that for a moment. Sunshine. A daughter named Sunshine who grew up to be the Sundown Bandit. Chatty looked at her for a moment and then asked her a question. Can I call you Sunshine, Sundown? She asked sweetly. You, Chatty Dawson, may call me anything you wish. You are my friend. I don't let just anyone do that. You know, said Chatty, I think I'll call you Sundown instead. Why is that? Asked Sundown. Because I don't want anyone to know you're the Sundown Bandit. Sheriff Bogus and Deputy Williams continued after the tracks that Sundown had left. They got as far as the brook when they themselves broke down their packs and struck a camp for the night. Once during the evening by the creek they thought they might have heard a gunshot, but they might have been mistaken. They built themselves a nice fire and settled down to a meal not half as nice as the one Sundown had prepared for Chatty Dawson, upstream of their location. "Well," said Sheriff Bogus, "I reckon we go upstream tomorrow. Those tracks end here, and near as I can tell, the bandit went into the water at this point and followed the stream just to throw us off." John Williams drank a sip of the White Lightning and passed it to the sheriff, who took a grateful snort of it. How you figure?" asked John. "How you figure he went upstream?" "Well," said Sheriff Bogus, "downstream of here is an old mill, and there's a lot of clutter in the creek, and all over the banks. Horse would go lame stumbling through some of that, and that would be just too bad. He knows this area same as I do. If he don't, then he's a fool for not knowing it and coming this way. No, he knows the wreck of that old mill down there, and I lay you odds he ain't aiming on trying to take that child through all of that mess and have his horse break an ankle." Williams looked into the fire before speaking again. "You reckon he's raped her yet? You think she's still an innocent or not?" Sheriff Bogus sat up and eyed him evenly. The smell of moonshine on the sheriff was a good deal more wicked than on Williams, and John cringed at the rage welling up in the larger man before him. "Let me just say that he best by God better not have," said the sheriff. John did not want to cross him when he saw the sheriff getting upset like that. Sheriff Bogus saw he was getting to Williams, and he really didn't want to scare him like that. He needed Williams more than the man would ever know. "You ever hear the story of the Sundown Bandit?" asked the sheriff, once they had gotten settled down again. Williams sat and listened as the sheriff started telling him everything they knew about the Sundown Bandit. "There's some relative down in the city jail at River's End right now, waiting for the end of a rope. Name of Jacobs, I think. He swears he's not the ringleader of the group, the Silent Shadows, but they're going to hang him anyway. That hanging judge, Batelgus, or whatever his name is, he will see to it that the end comes quite biblically to Mr. Jacobs. I know for a fact that judge has got more blood under his fingernails than most outlaws ever get on their bullets. He's the devil's own when it comes to hanging people." They talked for hours about the exploits of the Sundown Bandit, and about 3 in the morning they went off to sleep together. A little after that, Williams heard a distinct clunking in the water next to his head. The lull of the water had put him to sleep, but now something in the water had awakened him. He strained his eyes in the dark, but could see nothing. Well, it was probably nothing. Best not to wake up Bogus, or he'll accuse me of having night terrors. Yeah, best to just let it rest. Settling back down in his sleeping roll, Williams heard nothing at all the rest of the night. He finally drifted off, back into his ease once again. 6 inches away from his face, in the pitch black of night, something was staring at him in the water. Williams would never know it, for tomorrow the thing would be gone, but tonight it stared at him with glazed, accusing eyes. They pierced the darkness and stared right at his sleeping head. About 5 in the morning, the head of Sundown's fallen rabbit finally washed on downstream, past the camp of Sheriff Bogus and John Williams. One clue that neither of the two lawmen would ever see. Judge Batelgus sat in the confines of his nice carriage, staring absently out the window at the passing scenery. River's End was the next destination on his circuit. As circuit judge for this region, Betelgeuse was the one they called the hanging judge. His convictions and capital punishments were legendary, and he was greatly feared by anyone west of the Mississippi. Judge Betelgeuse didn't mind that reputation at all. When he walked into a courtroom, nobody dared breathe a word. It was rumored that crying babies would shut up in his courtroom upon the mere mention of his dreaded name. Judge Betelgeuse was an unholy terror, a great darkness of judgment. They called him many times by his real name, Satan. The word Satan means the accuser. That was who Betelgeuse was in reality, the accusing one, the Satan, the one who said a man was guilty until proven innocent. There was no mercy in his fierce black eyes, and there would be none for Mr. Jacobs either. He had admitted to riding with the Silent Shadows gang, hadn't he? Well, maybe not, but they would condemn him right then and there. They knew he had been an outlaw, and while mere bits of technical law might free him, Judge Betelgeuse was not impressed with technicality. Jack had rode with the Silent Shadows gang for a brief time. Yes, he certainly had. But Jack was basically a scumbag to start with, or so Betelgeuse thought. The gang had broken up, but how dare they break up the Silent Shadows before Betelgeuse could get his hands upon them? Betelgeuse was not to be outdone. He had friends in high places, and if the Dark One could not get revenge, it could not be had. He was, after all, the hanging judge, and his job was to hang people. Jack Jacobs had been arrested 2 days earlier on his way into town to buy supplies. He had been taken rather rudely to the jail and held without bond until this circuit court judge could be brought to town to hear his case. Jack didn't fear this at first, and he told his mother he thought everything was going to be all right. He had had every faith that he would be released soon and be able to get back to farming. But Judge Betelgeuse was planning to hang him on sight once he got to town. Now word had already gotten back to Jacobs in his cell that he was a dead man. For the past crimes of his brother and his family, he was going to hang. But the judge was still a week's journey outside of River's End, with at least 3 days between here and the cell containing Jack Jacobs. Soon he would get Mr. Jacobs and accuse him to his face. Soon he would have the ultimate satisfaction of seeing him hanged. The judge sat back in his carriage and rode on quietly, smiling to himself. Sundown and Chatty lay staring up at the stars that peeked through the canopy of tree limbs overhead. A peaceful autumnal breeze blew through the trees, and Chatty felt as peaceful as they could be together. She was well fed. She was warm and safe. Anyone who did not feel safe sleeping next to a friend like the Sundown Bandit was simply unable to feel safe anywhere. Chatty felt safer here than in her own mother's arms. She was sleepy also, and that helped her to get comfortable as well. They were sleeping on the bank of the brook, but once they had snuggled down deeply in Sundown's blankets, the cold earth beneath them got toasty warm and pleasant. Sundown could not ever remember being happier in her life, and neither could Chatty Dawson. That was what was beginning to bother Chatty. She liked this. She liked it a lot. Oh, sure, they were both beginning to smell, but it was like an odor bond between them. Because each one smelled like the other, it worked. Chatty couldn't tell her own odor at all next to Sundown. After supper that evening, Sundown had suggested that Chatty might be more comfortable in a pair of her old pants. To Chatty's never-ending surprise, Chatty not only had a spare pair of jeans for her to wear, but also a shirt and a pair of handmade leather spats to cover the tops of her dainty boots. So Chatty was dressed like the Sundown Bandit now, and wearing men's pants did something to her. It excited her. Forbidden feelings raced up and down her closely seamed legs. All of this was so forbidding and exciting. Yes, Chatty was beginning to love the Sundown Bandit's way of life. There was no terrifying Mrs. Browser with her 4-foot switch to boo her up every time she had to yawn or belch or worse. There were no punishments out here for bad manners, and all that ladylike crap was summarily dispensed with out here. Chatty had not felt this wild and free since she had been 5 years old. It felt great to be that way again. As the two lay together, staring up at the stars, Chatty had looked over at her friend and said, "Sundown?" Came the reply, as if it had been Bandy replying, and not the most wanted outlaw in the entire country. "Sundown, are you asleep?" "No," said Sundown. "What's on your mind, Sugarfoot?" Sugarfoot. Somehow or other Chatty had been graced with that name. Sugarfoot. Chatty felt her insides warm all over when she called her that. It made her feel really good inside. "Sundown," said Chatty, propping herself up on one elbow so she could stare down at the darkened face of her friend. Sundown would have been a terribly attractive woman if she had ever dressed up. One of Chatty's fantasies now was to dress up the Sundown Bandit like a living doll and see just how gorgeous she could make her. "I just want you to know, Sundown, I have enjoyed this time with you. It's not a kidnapping nor anything like that. I jumped on you and you saved my life. Had you not caught me, I would have been stuck back on that water tower from now on." "If I had not robbed your train," laughed Sundown, "you would not have been on the tower anyway. You would have been home with your mother, safe and sound." "Maybe this is better," said Chatty, above a whisper. "You mean that?" asked Sundown. "You really want to be here?" Chatty nodded, and Sundown could see in the dark that she was serious. "I don't think my mother loves me any more," said Chatty, tears in her voice. Sundown sat up and looked at Chatty seriously. Their eyes were now adjusting to the darkness, and the moon was coming out from behind the clouds. Down here in the shadows, they felt safe from everything and began confiding in each other. "My mother," said Chatty, conspiratorially, "whips me all the time now. She used to never do it, but now she does it all the time. She does it bare, Sundown, and it hurts. I don't know why she likes to do that to me, but she just straps me for anything." "But you're the best little girl in the world," said Sundown. "Aren't you?" Chatty snorted a laugh and wiped her eyes with her forearm. The red gingham long-sleeved shirt felt good against her face. "That's what you would think, wouldn't you, Sundown? I'm an honor student at the school. I am pretty, or so I'm told. I try to be sweet all the time. though I swear it's getting harder to be that way as I get older. I just can't do enough to please my mother, I think. I think... You think what, Chatty? Asked Sundown. I think I'm beginning to hate her. I know I am, Sundown. Mean woman. She thinks she's so pretty. Well, she'd be a whole lot prettier if she wasn't trying to hurt me all the time. Sundown stared up at the trees and remembered her own empty life without any real mother at all. Sundown had always thought it would have been nice to have had a mother, yet the only mother Sundown had ever had was a dream image of a large female breast full of milk. Not exactly a real mother at all. Sundown had never stopped to consider that having a mother might not be such a good idea. I think I know why your mother changed on you, Chatty. It was dark night now, and that meant Sundown could relax and be sensitive to this young girl. You are becoming a beautiful woman, Chatty Dawson. You will be a rival to your mother, same as if you were a strange woman. How do you know that? Asked Chatty. Did your mother do that to you? I didn't have a mother, Chatty. Oh, that's right, you told me. My daddy told me. He said that no woman could get along with any other woman in a household, and I was the woman in his house, which is why I think he didn't get another wife. Your mother is looking at you as a rival and not a daughter. Is that why she whips me all the time? No, I think she does it to make you little again, to humiliate you, to deny that you are a grown woman. After all, you don't make a grown woman take off her dress and bend over the bed to get a bare-butt whipping, do you? Only little girls have to do things like that. Really? Asked Chatty, seeing all this now for the first time. Yes, said Sundown. The whipping makes you little. The fact that you are bare makes you humiliated. A small, naked, humiliated girl is no threat to a mother. Did your father ever whip you, Sundown? Asked Chatty. Oh, yes, said Sundown. I don't think it had the effect on me he was looking for, though. And you still love him? After all that? Of course, said Sundown. Why wouldn't I? I don't love my mother, I don't think, said Chatty. Don't say that, Chatty, said Sundown. Don't ever say that. Why not, said Chatty. It's true. Yes, but you won't mean it later. You will understand why she did it when you have your own child. One day you'll be the one aging, and you'll be the one who sees her little girl blossom. You'll get jealous, too, same as your mother. Well, said Chatty, I won't whip her for being pretty. Won't you? Asked Sundown softly. Won't you do everything in your power to keep her little, so she won't run off and leave you? Chatty thought about that for a long time. That was why she had to go to finishing school. Maybe. To keep her unmarried. It had to be that. To keep her unmarried. Let's go to sleep, huh? Asked Sundown, eager to get back into her dream world and talk with her inner spiritual mother. All this talk of daughterly punishment was making Sundown queasy. She didn't want to be an adolescent girl. She wanted to be an infant. You couldn't punish an infant. Yeah, you couldn't hurt a baby. Everything with babies was neat. While Chatty lay there thinking of her mother and why she was so mean to her, Sundown sighed aloud and fell totally unconscious. She didn't make a sound the rest of the night. You, Jack Jacobs, will stand while we decide the verdict of your fate, said Judge Batelgus. Jack stood up in the empty courtroom. It was night, and there was only the sound of Judge Batelgus shuffling papers, the hollow, empty sound of papers in an empty courtroom. In here there were 5 men altogether, and one of them was the sheriff of River's End, a man named Pogues. Pogues was a fat, sloppy man with an eye for anything underhanded. No court, however, is carried out at night, and no court is carried out in secret. But this one was. "Jack Jacobs," said Judge Batelgus, "as to the charge of incorrigible conduct, I find you guilty." "There is no such charge," said Jacobs. "Silence in my court," said Batelgus, "or I will silence you." Jack Jacobs was silent in the court of Judge Batelgus. He closed his eyes and he was silent. Judge Batelgus cleared his throat and continued. "Incorrigible conduct," he reiterated. "Guilty." "Conspiracy to commit career crime," said Judge Batelgus. "Guilty." A murmur rose up among the 5 men, and Judge Batelgus had to peer over his glasses to silence his own troops. They were complaining to themselves that the crimes Judge Batelgus was charging Jacobs with having committed were not found in any law book. It was almost as if he was making them up as he went along. "Consanguinary criminal conduct," said Batelgus. "Guilty." The murmur increased. What the devil was consanguinary criminal conduct? "How do you plead?" asked Batelgus harshly. "Not guilty," said Jacobs, stunned, "because none of those crimes are real." "Silence!" screamed Batelgus. "You are charged as recorded, and you are guilty as charged. Sheriff, remand this man to your jailer, and before dawn, tomorrow morning, he is to be hanged in the public gallows. So ordered this day." He slammed his gavel down and stared at the sheriff. Sheriff Pogues was shocked. He approached the bench, something he never did, and he said, "Might I have a word with your honor? I have somewhat to discuss in chambers." "Judge Batelgus," Jacobs was screaming at him, "you cannot do this. This is—" "Judge Batelgus," said someone from the back of the courtroom. Batelgus looked past Jacobs, way to the back of his courtroom. It should have been empty back there, but there was a figure, a dark, ominous figure. It was a man dressed in black and red-tipped clothing, a distinguished gentleman by all appearances, except his face was a greenish color, with blackened circles under each eye, each very dark eye, with no pupil at all. Just a blackened hole from which wisped the finest trails of smoke like burnt-out ash-pots. The man's eyes had been on fire, and now they were smoldering quietly in the man's head. "You, sir," said Batelgus, feeling a bit of fear. "You, sir, advance and be recognized." "No," said the man. "Not till you've hanged an innocent man. Then you will see who I really am." "Oh, it's the devil!" cried Pogues, shivering like an enormous blubbering fool. "I know it's him." The face of the stranger changed with a cackling howl, an unearthly banshee-like wail, and the face, obscured in the shadow, drew nearer. Then, once light fell upon the face, it was totally recognizable. Batelgus felt his bowels give way, and perched upon his own judgment seat, he felt himself soil right where he sat. He could not help it. "Sir," yelled Batelgus in rage, "I shall have you for impersonating a judge." "No!" screamed Satan, his black eyes throwing sparks across the floor like tiny Roman candles. "It is I who shall have you for impersonating me." Batelgus tried to rise, but the load in his pants forbade it. The Satan thing drew nearer, and as it did so, all the men in the courtroom gasped aloud. The face on the devil was the face of Randall C. Batelgus himself.
"Not till you've hanged him," screamed the devil. "Then you will look upon the real me."
Satan cackled aloud and howled his parting statement in a terrific echo in the empty courtroom. The thing with Batelgus's face started to dissolve away.
"And none of you will survive,"
he said, vanishing in a plume of purple smoke. The room was very quiet for a moment, and then the terror settled in on the men. All of them, including Jacobs, were trembling in fear. Batelgus tried to think what to do to restore order again. It was hard to rightly judge anything with a load in one's trousers. It really was. He was to have to try, though. He slammed his gavel down and started to speak.
Bam, bam, bam.
"Order!" he screamed. "I will have it quiet in here."
"Judge Batelgus," yelled Pogues, "wake up, man! Don't you know who that was? That man was the devil himself, Judge Batelgus. Oh, let Jacobs go, for God's sake. He's done sent that black son of a dog here to haunt you to your grave. Let him go. Let us all live, Judge. Please, let us all live. Judge Batelgus, Judge Batelgus, Judge Batelgus."
"Wake up, Judge Batelgus." Judge Batelgus opened his eyes and looked into the face of Sheriff Dillard of Spring Rock. Spring Rock. 2 towns away from River's End. Spring Rock. Oh, thank God they were not in River's End. The town of Spring Rock had never looked so good before. Sheriff Dillard opened the coach door and reached into the sleeping judge to give him a hand. The coach sagged down on the left side as the driver disboarded to give a hand. "Did you have a nice nap, Judge?" asked Sheriff Dillard pleasantly.
"Why, I do believe that you got some sun on your face, sir.
"Sleeping like that'll do it. What you need is a good shot of—"
"Yes,"
said Batelgus, waking right up. "Yes, that's a dandy idea. A good shot of the best Spring Rock Saloon has to offer. Let's get to it." "Just this way, Your Honor," said the sheriff, helping the portly man down from his coach. "We'll get your parched throat cooled in no time, sir." As the 2 men made their way for the saloon, several of the town's fathers made their way over to be seen with the circuit-riding judge, who had the nickname of the Dark One, the Devil. And for just a few minutes back there in that coach, Judge Randall C. Batelgus himself had almost been believing it. Almost. They all went into the Spring Rock Saloon and started draining some serious and noxious spirits. Before long, Judge Batelgus had forgotten all about his nightmare on the coach in broad daylight. "What's it like to be the Sundown Bandit?" asked Chatty Dawson innocently. They were sitting over breakfast the next morning, drinking strong coffee and enjoying the morning. Sundown had begun to relax around this little girl, Chatty Dawson, who cleaned up after them and who seemed to make life in the wilds of uncharted North America bearable. Sundown looked at her and smiled. "Why do you want to know?" she asked, tongue-in-cheek. "Because," teased Chatty, rubbing her leg and blushing. The pants she was wearing still thrilled her no end to think about them. Men's pants, of all things. Mama would whip the hide right off her butt if she knew. "Because why?" continued Sundown softly. Normally it was not in the wild woman's nature to be so coy and playful, but Chatty was bringing out a side of the bandit she had never felt before. It felt good somewhere down inside her hard soul to lighten up and play with this child. It made her feel something she had never felt in her life before. It made her feel like a little girl herself. "Well, what's it like to be a man?" asked Sundown. "I don't know. I don't have one of their little equipments." She watched Chatty blush with great pleasure at that. "But," said Sundown, whipping out her 6-iron, "I have one of these, and this is just as good as any man's natural tool. Better even. It speaks louder, and there is no doubt who has spoken when it's all over." "You don't talk like an outlaw, Sundown," said Chatty. "You talk like you have been to school." "Oh, Chatty Dawson," spat Sundown, reholstering her iron. "I have all the school I need in books at my daddy's cabin. All school is, anyway, is books, and some teacher to make sure you read 'em. That's what my daddy said, anyway. I figure he was right." "That's about all there is to it," agreed Chatty, nodding slowly. "Well, then," she continued, "you asked me what it's like to rob trains and such. Well, girl, I'll tell you. It's like this. It's thrilling. I get high doing it." The look on Chatty Dawson's face would have made a picture. "You didn't think about that, did you, Miss Dawson?" asked Sundown quietly. "I get high doing it, Chatty. It feels good. It makes me all hot and bothered." Sundown waited for Chatty to blush really hard, and then she fell over laughing hysterically. Sundown had never laughed so hard in her life. She really had this poor kid going. "Oh, Lordy," said Sundown, "the look on your face, child." "Well, does it turn you on or not?" asked Chatty, wondering seriously. Sundown stopped laughing and regarded her closely. She wiped her eyes and sniffed. She took her nip bottle out of her back pocket and took a swig of her sour mash whiskey. She squinted at the girl and smiled, returning the bottle to her pocket again. "Yep," she said, belching. "It is really a rush to see a man tremblin' at the sight of you. That is thrillin', really. Oh, men, they think they own you body, soul, and birth canal, but they don't. I prove that, Chatty. Each time I point that gun in their face, I show 'em that nobody owns me." Chatty was quiet while she explained herself. "A man," drawled Sundown. "A man, now, would ha' gotten his fool self caught by this time, were he the Sundown Bandit. A man would ha' already done shot his mouth off to the wrong bunch of hombres, and none of those liver lizard cowards would ha' plugged him in the face. No, they would ha' plugged him behind some saloon while he was taking a leak. Oh, that coward would swear to his grandchildren that it was high noon in the middle of town, with every eye watching 'em, done up straight in the gut. A fair fight to the death, he'd say. A fair fight. Pff, she spat. But it would have been behind a saloon with his pants unbuttoned and his whanger out, about halfway through, so when the bandit turned to get his bullet, he'd pee all over himself." Sundown looked at the expression on Chatty's face and nodded. "Yes, a man named Sundown would have already gotten killed, and most likely just like I said, 'cause cowards love to get you when you are down, Chatty Dawson." Chatty felt the gravity of that situation, and it chilled her to the marrow. "But a woman, well, she keeps to herself and don't want nothing from no one. I got all the money I need, Chatty Dawson. My daddy's got me a fortune somewhere, and I just do this 'cause I like it. I beat the man every time I rob anything. I am the man, Chatty Dawson, and they all cringe and shudder." She looked at Chatty closely and said, "Would you like to try it?" "What?" breathed Chatty, her mouth dry. "Try what? Want to knock off a train with me?" These words, simply spoken and clearly stated, were like granite chunks falling on Chatty's ears. She couldn't believe what Sundown had just offered. That would make her a criminal. Chatty Dawson a criminal? Oh, Mama really would kill her for that. Yep, and Chatty, Sheriff Bogus, and John Williams, and all the others, too. They'd want to hang you dead. But then Sundown laughed, and eased Chatty considerably. It was just a joke, see? Nothing serious. Sundown didn't really want a sidekick like that. Did she? No, I work alone, said Sundown. I just wanted to... Yeah, said Chatty, derisively. I know. You just wanted to see the look on my face. Sundown lowered her voice very seriously. You have a very pretty face, Chatty, she told her. I like to look at it. Thank you, stammered Chatty, ashamed at what she had said. Thank you. I didn't mean to get all mean about it, Sundown. It's just that you seem to be playing with me, and, well, sometimes I don't like that so much. You understand me? Sundown nodded. I'm sorry, Chatty. I'm just bored and all out here alone. I ain't used to having company stay out with me here, and I sure ain't used to being sociable. Can you forgive me? She got up and went over to toss her coffee dregs out of her cup. She had lapsed back into her uneducated drawl again. Chatty noticed that whenever Sundown felt like she was threatened or embarrassed, she lapsed back into her drawl, her loose and uneducated speech. When she and Chatty were having girl talk, she spoke as well as Raven Sarles. When she was upset, she spoke worse than Sheriff Bogus. Chatty suddenly felt bad that she had upset her, and caused her to lapse back into her vulgar speech. Sundown, said Chatty, I'm sorry, girl. Come back and talk some more. Girl. The woman who was the Sundown Bandit turned to her, and she looked anything but a girl. Yet she came back to Chatty's side and sat down, still smelling like a wild animal in a stable. Sundown looked at Chatty and then stroked her hair with one rough hand. You could use some lotion on your hands, Sundown, said Chatty, caressing the woman's rough skin. What's that? asked Sundown. Never mind, said Chatty, dropping Sundown's hand into her own lap affectionately. Tell me about robbing trains. You didn't say about that yet. No, I didn't, said Sundown, did I? Well, robbing a train is easy. It's robbing banks what'll get you killed. I figured out a way to rob a train that no one would suspect they was being robbed. Don't do it like everybody else does it. Don't try to stop the train and get everybody's attention. That's dumb. Just do it while it's running, and you're in and out before they can say a word. Wait till that train starts up an upgrade, a high one, mind you, and then get on board. Or do it somewhere near a water tower where they're stopped. Rob a coach or two and jump off before it reaches the top of that hill or gets going again. It's best to try and guess whereabouts you're going to be and have your horse waiting on you. Then you can get off and go before they get the train stopped. Pinkerton's men are riding trains these days to try and catch me, but they can't. Pinkerton's men didn't think I would hit a train 20 miles out of Bad Rock Canyon by the water tower, Chatty. They was all up in the parlor car with their minds in a bottle, telling war stories. Just like I thought they'd be. I got up on that train and took 3 coaches before anybody had time to think. Oh, Pinkerton's men shoot at me, but I guess they was either too drunk or too yellow to come for me. I waited for 'em. You saw that yourself. But I was really waiting for you to jump on me, just to see if you would. Course they didn't come after me. They are yellow, Chatty. They got families, and they haven't been doing this crime fighting all their lives like I've been doing crime. You see, I'm a professional career criminal. They are just drawing their lousy pay. There is a distinct difference. Chatty looked up at Sundown with pride in her eyes. It was really strange for Sundown to be thusly adored, but Sundown was eating it up. "What's it like to rob a train, Sundown?" asked Chatty, and now there was real fire in her eyes. It was like asking a pirate what it was like to take a ship, or an actor what it was like to play to a full house. There was something thrilling about the very act that Sundown could relay to Chatty, just in the telling of it. "It's like nothing you ever done," said Sundown, getting excited herself. "It really is a rush to do it. You jump on a train you didn't pay to ride, and you go down the aisle like you own the place, baby. Oh, it is so beautiful." Sundown looked at Chatty with an embarrassed look. It was hard to admit that robbing trains did it for her, made her feel like $1,000,000 and all, but she was doing it for Chatty's sake. "Don't ever start it, Chatty Dawson," whispered Sundown. "Don't ever start this. It gets in your blood and makes you want it. It's like drugs." "What is it about it that makes you want it, Sundown?" asked Chatty, trembling with excitement. Sundown shrugged. "Why does some women want other women? 'Cause they tried it once and liked it, I guess. I don't know. They are that way 'cause they went and found out they were. My daddy showed me that I was criminal when I got old enough to ride herd with him. First place we ever hit was an old farmhouse owned by a circuit judge, some new guy, name of Battlejuice, Betellus, something like that." Sundown got a faraway look in her eye, and she was thinking about her uncle and how she'd better be getting her little butt down to River's End before day after next. Yeah, needed to get down and see the uncle. She had to try and get Chatty back home before then. "So what happened with Betelgeuse?" asked Chatty. She asked, startled, coming out of her own thoughts. "Oh, the judge. Well, we made a pretty mess of his place, and while I wasn't the Sundown Bandit in those days, I was there with the tribe just the same. I got plenty of experience that day, and we even stole us a couple of good-sized, overfed horses. Yonder there stands one of 'em." "You stole freighter from Betelgeuse?" asked Chatty, in shock. For a moment it seemed like Sundown was going to go for her gun. Her hand flinched like she might go for the butt end of that hog leg and draw down on Chatty for even speaking his name. "You just might want to tell me," said Sundown slowly, "how it is you can say his name so good when I can't." "He's a friend of my father's," whispered Chatty, ashamed. "He's been over to our house for dinner before." "Well, now, ain't that sweet?" said Sundown. "Tell you what you do, Miss Dawson. Next time that certain gentleman comes for high tea, or whatever it is he comes for, will you just take him aside and whisper into his fat little ear that I aim on blowing him away first chance I get." "Really?" asked Chatty, afraid that she might blow her away for practice, just for consorting with the enemy. "Yep." "Why do you want to kill Judge Betelgeuse?" asked Chatty. "What has he done to you?" "What he did to mine," whispered Sundown. "He killed my wolf." Chatty sat amazed. Sundown had a wolf? Chatty regarded Sundown, but she said no more. Now the thoughts of Sundown's wolf had taken the woman well back into her own mind, and Chatty saw it wasn't much use to ask Sundown about this wolf just now. Chatty knew Sundown enough to know that once she got that look on her face, it was like talking to a wall. "Some wolf," mused Chatty, shaking her head. "It must have been some wolf." "Well, lawsee," swore John Williams to himself. He was staring directly at the two people they were looking for. He was bent down behind a blackberry bush, staring at the back of Chatty Dawson and the Sundown Bandit. There they were like two birds on a fence post. Had Sundown not had her hat on, her secret might have been let out at that very moment. As it was, she was fully sundowned, and John Williams could only tell that the little one, now dressed in men's clothing, was Chatty Dawson. He could tell this only because that little filly was as pretty as anything he'd ever seen, and she was the blonde, spitting image of her mother, Jenny Lathrop Dawson. The two didn't notice as he got up and crept slowly away from the bush. He had to get back to Sheriff Bogus and tell him. The sheriff was still in the sack this morning, still drunk. John had gotten bored when he woke up and went for a walk upstream just to nose around a little bit. What he had found was the reason they were here. John Williams had left Sheriff Bogus sound asleep this morning in the camp. The sheriff had taken a few too many swigs of the rot gut, maybe, and was having trouble getting up. "Well, in all the time I knowed you, J.B., thought Williams to himself, I hain't never one-upped you till today. Looks like I get the credit for catching Sundown. Yee-haw! What a red-letter day it is for John K. Williams. What a glorious and wonderful day." "Deputy Dog," he patted his badge lovingly, "I reckon you done me proud today. Oh, it takes a keen eye and a steady heart to be the lawman of the caliber of such to catch the Sundown Bandit. That little Chatty Dawson was gonna plumb pee herself to know she had been rescued. And maybe she'd give me a peck on the cheek when they put the bandit in the cell in Bad Rock. Yeah, and another peck on the cheek when Sundown's neck snapped clean in two as the trap door under his no-good feet chlunkle-flunked open, allowing him to fall straight through to the devil